The blue ribbon in my hair is older than your father, older than this house, and older than the lines at the corners of my eyes. You've seen it your whole life, haven't you? Always the same faded blue, always tied the same way, like it simply grew out of my gray hair. Tonight, I'm going to tell you why I still wear it. The whole truth. The first love. The broken promise. And the moment I decided I would never again beg anyone to stay. You asked me earlier at dinner, with that half-laugh, half-curious tilt of your head. Grandma, why that old ribbon? Don't you have anything newer? And I pretended to brush you off. I said, oh, it's just a habit. But you saw it, didn't you? That flicker in my eyes. You're old enough now to hear the real story. Old enough to understand that sometimes the smallest thing a person wears is the heaviest thing they carry. Have you ever held on to something that everyone else thought was foolish? An old letter, a song, a photograph. Because you knew it was holding together a part of you no one else could see? That's what this ribbon is. It's not just about a boy I once loved. It's about who I decided to be when loving him stopped being safe. So, sit closer. I talk better when you're close. There you go, right here by my knee. And if I pause sometimes, don't rush me. Some doors are rusty from staying shut too long. Let's go back. Before I was your grandmother, before I was even anyone's mother. Back to a narrow street, a small town, and a girl with dark hair and a stubborn heart. The year was 1958. I was 17 and believed, like most 17-year-olds do, that my life would be both ordinary and miraculous at the same time. Our town was the kind of place where everyone knew who burned the toast that morning. And who came home late the night before. Summer hung in the air like a slow song, sticky and golden and a little too sweet. We lived in a small, two-bedroom house that always smelled faintly of starch and soap. My mother pressed shirts for half the men in town. My father never missed a day at the mill. Except on Sundays, when he'd fall asleep sitting up on the porch. Hands still curled around his empty coffee cup. My room was the one at the back, with the single window that looked over Mrs. Green's rose bushes. I had a narrow bed, a wobbly little dresser, and exactly one mirror. The kind that turned your face warm and a little softer in its glass. Because it had seen so many other faces before yours. I was not beautiful in the way the magazine girls smiled from their covers. But God gave me one gift, my hair. Thick, black, heavy as wet cloth when I washed it. Falling all the way down my back when I let it loose. People noticed my hair before they noticed me. And I hated it. It was always in the way, always pulled too tight. Always brushed into good behavior by my mother's patient, tired hands. Men notice hair, she would say, as if that was both a blessing and a warning. Better your hair than anything else. So, every morning before school, she'd sit me down on the stool in the kitchen. Comb in one hand, cup of coffee in the other. And she'd pull my hair back, back, back. Until my scalp tingled, and tie it with whatever bit of ribbon or string she could find. It was never pretty, just practical. And then came the county fair. If you've never been to a county fair in a small town, you don't know the particular magic of it. The whole world shrinks down to a few spinning rides. The smell of popcorn and tractor fuel. And the sound of people pretending, for just one night, that their lives are bigger and brighter than they really are. I had exactly one dress for special occasions. A soft yellow cotton one my mother had taken in and let out so many times. It was more patchwork than fabric. That afternoon, she pressed it until steam fogged up the kitchen window. Go, have fun, she said, handing me my worn sandals. But not too much fun. There was always that little edge in her voice. She knew the world, and she did not quite trust it with me. At the fair, the sun was still high when I arrived. Children darted between legs like minnows. Men in sweat-darkened shirts leaned against railings. Talking about crops, about money, about nothing at all. And there, among the stalls of cheap jewelry, tin toys, and sugary treats, was a little blue booth with a handwritten sign. Ribbons and bows, 5 cents. I remember stopping like my feet had been nailed to the dirt. On a line strung between 2 posts hung ribbons in every color you could imagine. Red bright as stop signs, yellow like lemon peel, green like glass bottles. And in the middle, a single blue ribbon. Not loud blue. Not baby blue. A calm blue, like evening sky just before it turns to night. It was simple, satin, soft-looking even from where I stood. It had no pattern, no lace, no sparkle. But I felt it in my chest, like someone had plucked a string that had always been there. Do you know that feeling? When something small suddenly feels like it was meant only for you? I had 10 cents in my pocket. Saved from running errands for Mrs. Green and sweeping up hair at the barber's on Saturdays. 10 cents that could buy me cotton candy, a lemonade, a ride on the Ferris wheel. Or that blue ribbon. It sounds silly now, I know. A piece of fabric versus the spinning lights of the Ferris wheel. But I couldn't stop staring. I reached into my pocket, touched the coins. And did something I almost never did at that age. I chose myself. I gave up the Ferris wheel that night. I gave up the lemonade, the candy, the games. I bought the ribbon. The woman behind the counter, round face, kind eyes, arms like she'd been lifting children all her life. Took my 5 cents and wrapped the ribbon around her fingers. She stepped forward and said, "Turn around, sweetheart." I hesitated. No one but my mother touched my hair. But something about her voice soothed me. I turned. I felt her fingers gather my hair, lighter than my mother's. Gentler, somehow proud. She tied that ribbon in a bow at the back of my head. Pulled just enough to keep it in place. And said, "There. Now the world knows you're worth tying something pretty to." I didn't know it then. But those simple words would echo inside me for a very long time. I stepped away from the booth, hands trembling. Heart beating far too fast for such a small thing. But the air felt different around me, like the night had leaned in a little closer. And that's when I saw him. He was leaning against the railing by the ring-toss booth. A paper cup of lemonade in one hand. The other shoved in his pocket like he didn't care about anything in the world. His name was James. You've heard your grandfather's name 1,000 times. This isn't his. This was before him. James wore his hair a little too long for the rules of our high school. And his shirt sleeves rolled up just enough to show the strong lines of his forearms. His smile was crooked, like he wasn't used to smiling full on. But when he did, oh, it was like he'd just thought of a secret he might share with you if you behaved. I'd seen him before, of course. Small town, one high school. He was the boy who sat 2 rows in front of me in English. Who answered questions with an easy confidence. Who sometimes hummed under his breath in the hallway. But that night, he wasn't just another boy in a row of desks. He was just a boy, standing under strings of bare bulbs. With sawdust under his boots. And a look on his face like he expected something good to happen to him. He saw me. Not just saw, in the way people take you in. And file you away under, brown hair, quiet, nothing special. He watched me like he was trying to decide something. Then, he pushed off the railing and walked straight toward me. Have you ever been so sure you were invisible? That when someone looks right at you, you almost turn around to see who's behind you? That's how I felt. I almost stepped aside. But he kept coming, eyes on me, smile growing slow and shy. When he stopped in front of me, he did this little half nod, like we hadn't spent 3 years sharing the same hallways. "Evening," he said. His voice was lower than most boys our age. With this nervous edge that made my heart flutter in a way that was entirely new and entirely terrifying. "Evening," I said. Trying to sound like girls in the movies sounded when men greeted them. Casual, unshaken, like I wore blue ribbons every day. And boys walked up to me all the time. He glanced up, eyes tracing the line of my hair. And said, almost to himself, "That's new." "What is?" I asked, though I knew. "The ribbon," he said. "It suits you." That was all. 3 words, simple as bread. It suits you. You wouldn't think a life could pivot on something that small. But sometimes the floor shifts not with an earthquake, but with 3 quiet words and a borrowed ribbon tied by a stranger. He asked if I wanted a lemonade. I said I didn't, even though my throat was dry and I could taste sugar in the air. So he bought one anyway and handed it to me. "Just in case you change your mind," he said. We walked along the fairgrounds, talking about teachers we didn't like, neighbors we'd both known forever, the way old Mr. Carter still drove with his turn signal on for 3 blocks. Then he asked something softer. "What are you going to do after we graduate?" It was the question no one in my family really talked about. My mother assumed I'd eventually marry someone steady from town. My father assumed I'd take whatever job turned up. But in the quiet corners of my mind, I'd pictured something different. "I want to go to the city," I said. "Maybe study something. I don't know what yet. Just something that doesn't smell like the mill." He laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was this delighted sound, like I'd just handed him proof that he wasn't the only one dreaming of somewhere else. "Me too," he said. "I want to study engineering. There's a program in the city. If I get in." "Of course you'll get in," I said, surprised at how certain I sounded. He looked at me for a long moment. The fair buzzing behind us. Kids shrieking on rides, some country song warbling from a distant speaker. "You really think so?" he asked. "I do," I said. And I meant it. Something changed in his eyes then. Like a door opening just a fraction. He smiled, not the crooked, teasing smile he wore around his friends, but something more tentative, more hopeful. We didn't kiss that night. Stories like to rush to the kiss. But real life takes its time. Instead, when the fair lights began to dim, and parents started calling their children, he walked me halfway home. At the corner of Maple and Birch, where the streetlight hummed and moths battered themselves against the glass, he stopped. "I like your ribbon," he said again. "Maybe you should wear it again Sunday. At church." "Maybe I will," I said. He took one small step closer. "I'll look for you," he said. Then he turned and walked away, hands in his pockets, like he hadn't just reached into the future and nudged it onto a different path. You might think this is just a story about a girl, a boy, and a ribbon he happened to notice. But that night, when I untied the ribbon before bed and laid it carefully on my dresser, I wasn't thinking of the woman's kind words from the booth, or even of my own small act of choosing myself. I was thinking of his eyes when he said, "I'll look for you." Have you ever had someone say they'd look for you, and for the first time in your life, you believed that maybe you were worth finding? I wore the blue ribbon again on Sunday. Of course I did. I tried to pretend I was tying it in my hair, just because I liked it. But my hands were shaking, and my mother noticed. "What's gotten into you?" she asked, pinching the ribbon between her fingers. "This old thing?" "Old, already. Even then. Isn't that funny?" "It's nothing," I said. "I just like the color." She studied me for a moment. Eyes narrowed, then shrugged. "Fine," she said. "But don't go getting any big ideas in that head of yours. Pretty things have a way of getting a girl in trouble." In church, I sat 2 pews ahead of where James's family always sat. The hymns rose and fell. The preacher talked about commitment and covenant, and the promises we make when our hearts are too young to know how they'll change. I didn't hear most of it. I could feel his gaze burning the back of my head. Could feel the weight of the blue ribbon. Like a secret message tied for him alone. After the service, under the hot sun, our families exchanged the usual small-town pleasantries. How's your mother? Is your sister still away at college? Did the rain help your garden any? James and I pretended not to be waiting. We pretended not to be measuring the space between us. In breaths and heartbeats. Finally, when the cluster of adults thinned, he came over, hands shoved in his pockets. Hello, he said. Like saying hello on a Sunday morning was the bravest thing in the world. Hello, I replied. He looked at the ribbon, smiled, and said, I knew you'd wear it. Don't be so sure of yourself, I said. But my cheeks were hot, and we both knew he was right. That day began something. Slow at first, cautious, like testing the thickness of ice with one foot. We walked home together after school sometimes. We lingered by the lockers. We passed notes folded into tiny squares. He learned that I loved old books whose pages smelled like dust and rain. I learned that he dreamed of building bridges. Literal ones, made of steel and concrete. Because he liked the idea of connecting places that once had only been joined by hope. We didn't call it love yet. We called it staying after class and walking the long way home. We called it, can I carry your books? And, you can have the last piece of gum. Isn't it strange how we never see the first time our life tilts? Until we are looking back from far ahead? Weeks turned into months. And the blue ribbon became my quiet rebellion. On days I knew I'd see him after school, I tied it in my hair. On days I felt small or invisible, I tied it tighter. To my parents, it was just that blue thing I seemed oddly attached to. To my classmates, it was my one attempt at prettiness. To James, though. Well, he once told me. When I see that ribbon in the hallway, it's like the day gets a little easier to carry. For a 17-year-old girl. That might as well have been a proposal. Spring came, and with it, the letters. One afternoon, near the end of the school year, James met me behind the gym. In that little alcove where the bricks were always cool. And the smell of cut grass drifted in. He was holding a thin, official-looking envelope. His hands shook when he passed it to me. Open it, he said. I can't. Why not? I asked. Because if it's bad news, I don't want it to arrive in my own hands. And if it's good news, I want it to come from you. Tell me. Would you have been able to say no to that? I opened it. Inside was a letter on heavy paper. A crest at the top. Words about congratulations and acceptance and this fall and the city. You got in, I said. Voice breaking on the last word. He stared at me, searching my face as if the truth might be hiding there, instead of on the page. Say it again, he whispered. You got in. He leaned his head back against the brick wall, eyes closed, and laughed this disbelieving laugh that I can still hear if I try. Then he opened his eyes, pulled me close for the first time, and held me so tight I could feel his heart pounding against my cheek. I wish I could tell you that in that moment. I felt only joy for him. Pure and uncomplicated. But underneath the joy was something else. A small, cold knot of fear. Because where there is leaving, there is always the possibility of not returning. He must have felt it too. Because he pulled back, studied my face, and said very softly, I'm not leaving without you. The words hung there between us. Terrifying and beautiful. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, he said. I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it. Whatever I'm building, I want you beside me when I do. We'll figure it out. We'll go together. I thought of my parents. Of my father's tired hands, my mother's careful warnings. I thought of our small kitchen. Of the way the town felt like a box I was supposed to stay inside. Then I thought of the city. The glitter of streetlights. The tall buildings I'd only ever seen in magazines. Together? I repeated. Together, he said. That's my promise to you. Do you know how dangerous promises are? When spoken by people who still believe they can outgrow anything? We made plans in whispers. I would apply to a secretarial course in the city. We would get cheap rooms near each other. We would work, study, save. And one day, we didn't say the word marriage yet. But it floated there. Unspoken but understood. One evening, under that same humming streetlight at Maple and Birch. He took my hand. Reached up with the other. And tugged gently at the blue ribbon in my hair. The bow slipped loose. My hair fell around my shoulders. He held the ribbon between his fingers. Looked at it like it was something sacred. And said, when we leave this town. Wear this the day we go. So I'll know you're still mine. I should have heard the danger in that word, mine. But all I heard then was belonging. I nodded. I will, I said. That's my promise to you. Two teenagers. Under a cheap streetlight. Trading promises like they cost nothing at all. Summer came. The air grew thicker. Long days stretching like chewing gum. Full of small goodbyes we pretended weren't goodbyes at all. James worked at the hardware store. Saving money for the move. I picked up extra hours wherever I could. At the diner, the dress shop. Even cleaning Mrs. Green's house from top to bottom. At night, when the town finally quieted. I would sit by my window. Blue ribbon in my lap. And imagine the life we were going to build. What did I think it would be like? Tiny apartment, yes. Cheap furniture, probably. But I imagined laughter echoing off those thin walls. Shared cups of coffee. His books and my notebook spread across the same table. I imagined us being poor and happy and young and together. I imagined everything but the thing that would actually happen. Because the truth is, the moment you build your entire future on someone else's promise, you place your dignity in their hands. And people, my love, are wonderful and weak. In the same breath. The first crack appeared a month before he was supposed to leave. He was quiet that day. Our steps slow as we walked along the river. The water was low, exposing stones that had stayed hidden all spring. He kept kicking at them, sending them skittering into the shallows. What's wrong? I asked finally. Nothing, he said, in that way that means everything. James, I said. And he flinched at the sound of his own name. Like it hurt him. He stopped walking. Looked out over the water. And said. My father thinks I'm a fool. For what? I asked. For thinking I can drag a girl with me to the city. And play house on scraps, he said bitterly. For not focusing. For letting myself get distracted. Is that what I am? I asked. Heart pounding. A distraction? His face changed so fast it almost broke my heart. No, he said. No. God, no. You're the only thing that makes any of this feel real. Then what is he saying? I asked. He hesitated. He says I should go alone first. Get settled. Make sure I can handle the program, the job, the city. He says bringing you would be irresponsible. He says. He swallowed. He says I'm not a man yet if I can't stand on my own 2 feet. Without leaning on some girl's love. There it was. Not an earthquake. Just the first small crack. What do you think? I asked quietly. He kicked another stone. Watched it disappear beneath the muddy water. I think, he said slowly. I promised you we'd go together. He didn't say, and I keep my promises. He didn't say, nothing will change that. He just stared at the river. Jaw clenched. Caught between the weight of his father's expectations and the lightness of our shared dreams. Have you ever watched someone stand in the space between who they want to be and who they are afraid they really are? It is one of the loneliest places in the world. Over the next weeks, the crack widened. Not all at once. Just hairline fractures spreading under the surface. He canceled plans last minute. He showed up late, sometimes not at all. He didn't talk as much about apartments and courses and city streets. He talked instead about responsibility. About, maybe waiting a bit. About, what's realistic. Each time he pulled back, I reached forward. I reminded him of his own words. Together, I would say. That was your promise. He'd look at me with guilt clouding his eyes. Pull me close. Say, I know, into my hair. I wanted to believe that love, if pressed hard enough, could reshape the world around it. But the world is stubborn. And so are fathers who see their sons' futures like lines already drawn in ink. One evening, about 2 weeks before his departure date, James asked me to meet him at the old train station. The station had been mostly abandoned for years. Trains only passing through on their way somewhere else. We used to go there to sit on the platform, legs dangling over the edge, pretending we were about to be whisked away. When I arrived, the sky was smudged with gray, and the sound of crickets hummed in the tall grass. He was already there. Hands in pockets, shoulders hunched. The moment I saw his posture, I knew. You always know. You just don't want to. What is it? I asked, though my chest already ached. He didn't reach for me. He didn't smile. He just said. I spoke to my father again. And? He's right, in some ways, he began. My heart dropped so fast I almost swayed on my feet. In what ways? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He says if I drag you with me and it goes badly, I'll have ruined more than one life. He says I owe it to both of us to make sure I can stand on my own first. He says. He looked up then, eyes wet. And for a moment I saw the boy from the fair, frightened and hopeful. He says if I really care about you, I won't ask you to gamble everything on me. Not yet. And what do you say? I asked. He exhaled, long and shaky. I say, he might be right, he whispered. There it was. The shift. The moment when, together, began to dissolve into maybe later and someday. So what are you telling me? I asked. I'm telling you, he said. I need to go first. Alone. Just for a little while. I'll get settled. Find a place. Then I'll send for you. That's my promise. Promises again. Piled on top of each other like fragile plates. One wobble away from shattering. I remember feeling like the air had thickened. Like I was suddenly breathing through wool. You promised we'd go together, I said quietly. I know, he said. Voice breaking. I know what I said. But maybe this is the better way. For both of us. Better for who? I asked. We stared at each other. The tracks stretching out on either side. Rails catching the last weak light of day. Have you ever stood in a place you used to fill with laughter, and suddenly felt like a stranger there? That was the station that night. I love you, he said. Finally stepping closer. His hand reaching out like an apology. I didn't step back. But I didn't step forward either. I just stood there. Still as a stone in the river. If you love me, I said slowly. Why can't we keep the promise we already made? Because loving you, he said, and being the man I'm supposed to be, might not be the same thing. It was an honest answer. It was also a crack that no amount of love could seal. We parted that night with his new promise hanging between us. I'll send for you. He held my face in his hands, kissed my forehead instead of my mouth, and repeated it like a prayer. I walked home without feeling my feet. In my room, I stood before my mirror, staring at the girl staring back at me. I untied the blue ribbon from my hair, held it in my hands, and asked the empty room, what am I worth if all my plans can be postponed? Have you ever realized, all at once, that you've hitched your whole life to someone else's maybe? It's like stepping off a bus and realizing the ground is still moving. The day he left, the sun was too bright. Bright days make painful things feel wrong. As if the sky hasn't received the proper notice. The whole town seemed to be at the station that morning, wishing him well, patting his father's back, talking about making something of himself. I stood a little apart, blue ribbon tied in my hair, just like we promised. No one commented on it. To them, it was just my usual. Only he knew I wore it as a flag. A small, stubborn reminder that I still believed in the original plan, even if we were now taking a detour. He found me in the crowd, dropped his suitcase at his feet, and pulled me into his arms. All right, he said into my hair. I'll send for you. As soon as I can. I swear it. Don't swear, I whispered. Just do it. He pulled back, looked at me like he wanted to memorize my face, then reached up and tugged gently on the end of the ribbon. Keep wearing this, he said, until the day you come to me. Then you can take it off, and it will have done its job. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The train whistle blew. A long, mournful sound that seemed to stretch out over everything I'd ever known. He kissed me once, quick and desperate, then grabbed his suitcase and boarded. I stood there until the train was nothing but a distant smear, until the rails stopped singing under my feet. What do you do when the person who held your future in his hands rides away with it in his suitcase? You go home. You stand in your small kitchen. You help your mother peel potatoes. You pretend nothing inside you has changed, even as everything has. The letters came at first. Long, clumsy, earnest things, full of street names I didn't recognize. Descriptions of noisy roommates. Complaints about professors. City's loud, he wrote. But I keep imagining you here. There's a coffee shop on the corner, where I can see you studying. Your ribbon the only soft thing in the whole room. I would read those lines at night, under my thin blanket, and feel the distance like a bruise. I wrote back, telling him about Mrs. Green's roses, about my father's cough getting worse, about how the town seemed smaller now, that I knew there were whole streets crowded with strangers elsewhere. I asked, gently at first, how is the search for a place going? I looked at some courses in the city. Do you think I should apply now? He answered, but always vaguely. Soon. Working on it. Money's tight. I don't want you coming here until I can offer you something decent. Each soon was a thread. Each thread tied my hope a little tighter, to a future I couldn't quite see. Months passed. Letters became shorter. He apologized more. Sorry I haven't written, work's been crazy. Sorry, my roommate's been sick. Sorry. Sorry is a word that, when used too often, starts to sound like the hollow rattle of a jar with nothing in it. Have you ever watched someone's handwriting change over time? How the effort drains from the loops and lines. His did. The early letters were careful. Every word balanced like he was placing stones in a garden. Later, the ink trailed off more. Sentences ended abruptly. And then, one day, the letters stopped. Just like that. No explanation. No warning. Just silence. Thick and heavy and loud in its own way. At first, I made excuses for him. He must be busy. He must be ill. He must have misplaced my address. The post office must have lost the letter. The city must have swallowed him whole for a while. I wrote again. And again. My letters became shorter too. Not because I had less to say, but because every sentence began to feel like begging. Are you all right? I haven't heard from you. Did my last letter reach you? Please write. The word please started to taste like rust on my tongue. Weeks turned into a month. Then 2. Then 3. The town stayed the same. Same cracked sidewalks. Same gossiping neighbors. Same church hymns. But I felt like I was walking through it in a dream. He'll write, my mother said once. Catching the way my eyes lingered on the empty mailbox. Boys are foolish, not heartless. Some are both, my father muttered from his chair. I didn't know yet which kind James would be. One late afternoon, when the air hung heavy with the smell of rain that refused to fall, I decided I couldn't stand inside the waiting anymore. I went for a walk. Blue ribbon tight in my hair. Just to feel like I was moving. I found myself near the post office. As if my feet had chosen the route without consulting my brain. Inside, the clerk, Mr. Howard, looked up with his usual bored expression. He'd been weighing packages and handing over stamps since before I was born. Afternoon, he said. Afternoon, I replied. I was wondering. Is there any chance you've got a letter for me? That got misplaced? He shook his head. Nothing in your box that shouldn't be there. I hesitated. Then asked the question that made my heart pound in my ears. What about from the city? From, James Miller? Something flickered across his face then. Gone almost as quickly as it appeared. I can't show you other people's mail, he said. I'm not asking you to, I said. I just. Has anything come from him? Maybe undeliverable? Returned? He studied me for a long moment. Then sighed. You didn't hear it from me, he said softly. But no. Nothing from him in months. The floor swayed underneath me. But he used to write, I said. There were letters before. Oh yes, Mr. Howard said. Big stack of them once. Boy practically kept me in business. But not lately. Could something have happened to him? I asked. The words scraping out of me. He looked at me. And something gentler entered his eyes. I don't know, dear, he said. The world's a big place. Sometimes people just. He trailed off. Gesturing vaguely. Like there was no word for what he meant. But there was a word. Many, in fact. One of them was leave. I stepped out of the post office. Into air that finally decided to make good on its promise. Rain began to fall. Thin and cold at first. Then heavier. I walked home soaking wet. Ribbon plastered to my hair. Dress clinging to my legs. In my room. I sat on the edge of my bed. And stared at the stack of his letters tied with string in my drawer. Then, with hands that trembled more from anger than sorrow, I untied the string. Spread the letters out. And read them all again. Start to finish. Have you ever reread old words? Knowing the ending they didn't know yet? Always, in those letters. Felt like a small betrayal now. Every forever felt like a joke. No one had warned me was coming. But I still wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The truth didn't come in a letter. It came on a Sunday. As so many truths in small towns do. I was walking back from church alone that day. My mother had stayed behind to help with the bake sale. My father had gone home early, complaining about his back. I was halfway down Maple Street when I heard someone call my name. Annie. It was Mrs. Carter. A woman whose tongue was as quick as her pies were good. She bustled up, smelling of flour and perfume, and took my arm like she'd known me all my life. Which, in a way, she had. You heard, right? She asked, eyes bright. Heard what? I asked, a familiar dread curling in my stomach. Oh, I forget, you don't keep up with these things. Always got your nose in a book. She'd sked, then leaned in, voice lowering with delighted seriousness. James Miller, she said. Getting married. The world went very, very quiet. To who? I heard myself ask, my voice sounding like it came from far away. Some girl from the city, she said, waving her hand. Came from a good family, I hear. Met her at the college. They're saying she's studying something fancy. I can't remember what. Oh, but isn't it exciting? Our little James, all grown up. She smiled, waiting for me to mirror her joy. I did not. I could not. Must run in his family, she continued, oblivious to the color draining from my face. His father went to the city, found his wife there too. Guess some boys just can't find what they need at home. Have you ever heard someone describe your heartbreak? Like it's a charming piece of town trivia? I really must get home, I said, stepping back. Oh, of course, dear. Give your mother my best. I walked away on legs that didn't feel like they belonged to me. The sky was clear. Sunlight bright. Nothing around me acknowledging that something had just ended. At home. I went straight to my room. Closed the door. And finally, let myself fall apart. I didn't sob prettily, like girls in movies do. I made no graceful sounds. I curled around the ache inside me and cried until my throat burned. The blue ribbon pulled at my scalp. I tore it loose, clutching it in my fist so hard. My knuckles ached. On my dresser, my mirror reflected a girl I barely recognized. Eyes swollen, hair wild, face blotchy. Stupid, I whispered at her. Stupid, stupid girl. Was I angry at him? Yes. At myself? Even more. Because I had taken a young man's promises and built my entire life on them. I had turned a ribbon into a contract, signed in my own hope. Now the contract lay in shreds at my feet. After a while, when the sobs ran out, and only a dull shaking remained, I sat up, back against the wall, ribbon still clenched in my fist. My mother knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. She took one look at me, and closed it behind her quietly. She sat on the bed beside me, hands folded in her lap. For a long time, she said nothing, just breathed, softly, like she was trying not to disturb whatever fragile thing was left of me. Finally, she spoke. Who told you? She asked. Of course she knew what it was about. Mothers usually do. Mrs. Carter, I said hoarsely. In the street. My mother's face tightened. That woman, she muttered. More to herself than to me. I stared at the ribbon in my hand. It was supposed to be me, I said. We had a plan. He promised. She was quiet for a moment. Eyes on the knot of blue in my fist. Did you promise too? She asked finally. Yes, I whispered. We promised each other. And did you keep your promise? She asked. The question cut through the fog in my head. Yes, I said. I waited. I wrote. I believed him. Then you did your part, she said simply. Doesn't matter, I replied. Voice cracking. He broke his. What good is half a promise? She looked at me with something like pity. But also respect. The good, she said slowly, is that you now know what you are capable of keeping. You know what your word is worth. His word says something about him. Yours says something about you. They are not the same thing. Her words should have comforted me. They didn't. Not yet. Then what am I supposed to do with all this? I asked. Voice raw. All this love with nowhere to go? She sighed. You're supposed to decide who you're going to be now, she said. That's the only thing you can ever really do. When someone drops you like that, you decide whether you climb back up with your head high or crawl after them, begging. She brushed a damp strand of hair from my face. Then tapped the ribbon in my hand. Whatever you do with this, she said. Do it for you. Not for him. Not for what could have been. For you. Then she stood. Smoothed her skirt. And left the room. Her words hung in the air long after the sound of her footsteps faded. That night became the line down the center of my life. On one side, the girl who believed promises made under fairground lights. On the other, the woman who had to decide what to do when those lights went dark. I sat on the floor, back against the bed, ribbon still in my hand, and turned my mother's words over and over in my mind. Who was I going to be now? The girl who waited? The girl who begged for explanations? The girl who shrank herself down to be easier to leave, so it would hurt less next time? Or someone else? I thought of James on that train platform, telling me to keep wearing the ribbon. Until the day you come to me. I thought of him in some city church, slipping a ring onto a girl's finger, looking at her the way he used to look at me. Then I thought of the woman at the fair, all those years ago, tying the ribbon in my hair and saying, now the world knows you're worth tying something pretty to. That's when something shifted. I had let that ribbon become a symbol of us. Our plan. Our promise. Our future. But before it had been ours. It had been mine. Bought with my own 10 cents. Chosen in a moment when I did something I almost never did. I chose myself. Maybe, I thought. Just maybe. I could choose myself again. I stood up. Legs stiff. And walked to the mirror. My reflection still looked wrecked. Eyes swollen. Cheeks tear-streaked. There was no magic transformation. No sudden glow of empowerment. But there was something new in my gaze. Or maybe something old I hadn't seen in a while. I lifted my hands. Gathered my hair. And began to braid it. My fingers moved slowly. Clumsy at first. Then sure. When the braid hung over my shoulder, I took the blue ribbon and tied it at the end. Not at the back of my head where he used to tug it, but near my collarbone, where I could see it when I looked down. It was a small change, but it changed everything for me. This is mine, I whispered at my reflection. Not his. Not ours. Mine. In that moment, I made a decision so quiet. No one in the world heard it but me. I decided I would not go to the city on a promise. Not his. Not anyone's. If I went, it would be because I chose it for myself. And I decided something else, too. I would not chase explanations. I would not write another letter. I would not beg him to tell me why. Because any answer he could give me would still be too small to fill the space of what he'd taken. Instead, I would carry this hurt with as much dignity as I could manage, until it softened into something else. Let him live with the weight of his broken word. I told the girl in the mirror. I will live with the honor of having kept mine. His broken promise was his burden. My kept promise became my strength. Have you ever felt your heart break? And, right underneath the crack, felt a new kind of backbone forming? That was me. Standing in that small back bedroom, tying a blue ribbon at the end of my own hair. Life did not immediately become better. That's the part stories like to skip. But I won't lie to you. The weeks after that were hard. I woke up each morning, and for a second, forgot. Then I'd remember. And the remembering felt like falling. All over again. I saw him everywhere. In the boy at the grocery store, with the same slope to his shoulders. In the man at church whose laugh sounded almost like his. The blue ribbon felt heavy some days, like a stone tied to the end of my braid. But every morning, I tied it anyway. Why? Because if I only wore it when it didn't hurt, I would have buried that piece of myself along with him. And I refused to give him that much. I took a job at the dress shop in town, hemming skirts, measuring women for Sunday bests, pinning fabric with fingers that slowly stopped trembling. I saved what little money I could. I took evening classes at the community center. Typing, bookkeeping, whatever I could manage. My world did not get bigger all at once, but it stopped shrinking. Sometimes, at night, I'd sit by the window, letters still tied with new string in my drawer, and wonder what I'd do if he walked back into town, hat in hand, apologies spilling from his mouth. Would I forgive him? Would I run into his arms like women did in the movies? Would I beat my fists against his chest, demanding answers? I believed, for a while, that I would be weak if that happened, that I'd crumble. But as time passed, as I showed up to work every day, as I kept my promises to myself, to learn, to save, to breathe, I realized something simple and profound. I was still here. He had left. But I had stayed. In my own body. In my own life. The girl who had once built her future on his soon was now quietly building her own today. A year passed. Then another. I heard bits and pieces about him through town whispers. Doing well. Good job. Big firm. Married now. Expecting a baby. Each fragment landed in my chest like a small pebble. Then slowly sank. Did I hate him? Sometimes. Did I miss him? Also sometimes. But more and more, I missed the version of myself who hadn't yet handed her future to someone else. So I started reaching for her again. I applied for a job in the city. Not because of him, but because those tall buildings had been calling to me long before his name entered the story. When the acceptance letter came, typed and official, offering me a secretary position at a small law office, I sat on my bed, blue ribbon coiled beside me, and laughed through tears. Then I did something important. I did not look up his address. I did not imagine running into him on some busy street. I did not script speeches in my head. Instead, I asked myself a question. If he had never existed, would I still want this? The answer was yes. That was how I knew I could go. The day I left for the city, I stood in front of my small mirror. Suitcase by the door. Parents already sniffing in the kitchen. My hair had grown longer again. braid thick and sure down my back. I held the blue ribbon in my hands and thought of all the meanings it had carried. A treat bought with my own saved coins. A boy's admiring glance. A promise under a streetlight. A mark of waiting. A witness to heartbreak. A symbol of my decision not to chase. Who should it belong to now? I smiled at my reflection. Eyes still softer than they'd once been. But steadier. This time, I said to the girl in the glass. You're going to the city because you promised yourself you would. I tied the ribbon at the end of my braid. Not for him. Not for any maybe. For me. For that 17-year-old girl under the fairground lights. Who had once dared to choose something just because she loved it. The city was loud and bright and unforgiving. The first apartment was small enough that if I stretched my arms out, I could almost touch both walls. The bed sagged. The faucet dripped. The street noise never fully disappeared. I was lonely at first. Of course I was. Loneliness doesn't vanish just because you chose it for yourself. But I went to work every day. I learned the rhythm of the office. The way Mr. Green always tapped his pen twice before signing anything. The way Miss Taylor in accounting hummed under her breath when she was focused. I poured coffee, typed letters, filed documents, and slowly, the city became less of a backdrop to my heartbreak, and more of a place in which I was actually living. Sometimes, on crowded buses, I'd catch a glimpse of a profile that looked like his. My pulse would jump. Then the man would turn. And I'd see it wasn't him at all. Each time that happened, the jump faded a little faster. I went to the movies with other girls from the office. I tried foods I'd never heard of. I bought second-hand books from street vendors, filling my small room with other people's stories. And always, every morning, I tied the blue ribbon into my hair. Not as a memorial to him, though sometimes, on the worst days, it still felt a bit like that. But more and more, it became my reminder of something else. I had survived the worst thing I'd been sure would destroy me. I wore the same ribbon, but I wasn't the same girl anymore. Have you ever noticed how the same object can mean completely different things as you change? That's what the ribbon became. A quiet, stubborn, daily act of self-respect. Years later, when I met the man who would become your grandfather, I was no longer waiting at any train stations, literal or otherwise. His name was Daniel. He wasn't loud or dazzling. He didn't arrive with dramatic speeches or sweeping gestures. He arrived on a Tuesday morning with an overstuffed briefcase and a quietly apologetic smile. Because he was late on his first day at the office. I liked him immediately. Not in a fireworks way, but in a "this person seems like he tells the truth" way. We became friends. Real friends. We talked about case files and office gossip. About our families. About the best cheap diners near the office. He noticed the ribbon too. One lunchtime, as we sat on a bench in a small park, eating sandwiches from wax paper, he said, "You always wear the same blue ribbon. Is it bad luck to change it?" The question landed softly, without any of the old sharp edges. "Something like that," I said, smiling. "Must be important to last this long," he said. "It is," I replied. But not in the way most people would think. I could have told him the whole story then. I didn't. Not because I was hiding it, but because some stories need time to know they won't swallow the new thing you're building. Instead, I watched the way he listened when other people spoke. How he never interrupted. How he didn't make promises casually. We dated for a year. Before he asked me to marry him. There was no fairground. No Ferris wheel. No dramatic train. Just our small apartment. 2 chipped mugs on the table. And a ring he'd saved months for. Glinting in a simple box. I won't promise you fireworks, he said. Voice steady. But I will promise you this. I will not run away from the hard things. I will not give you soon. When what you deserve is yes or no. That, more than any grand declaration, was what made me say yes. On our wedding day, I stood in front of another mirror. Different room. Different city. Same face. Older now. Eyes wiser. My mother had come to stay with me for the week. As she helped fasten the buttons on my simple dress, she noticed the ribbon on the dresser. "You're wearing it?" she asked. Voice soft with surprise. "Yes," I said. "Not for him. For me." She smiled. Eyes glistening a little. "Good," she said. "That's how it should be." I braided my hair. Tied the ribbon at the end. And looked at myself one last time. The girl who had once cried herself hoarse over a broken promise now stood tall, about to make new promises. Not because she needed someone to rescue her, but because she had learned how to stand on her own, and had chosen to share that strength. Daniel loved the ribbon. He never tried to cut it out of my story. Never asked me to throw it away. Or pretend the past hadn't happened. Once, years later. When you were just a baby. And he was rocking you to sleep in the living room. He watched me untie the ribbon before bed and said, "You know, I've never asked what that really means to you." I smiled, running the fabric through my fingers. "It means," I said, "that once, I thought I would die from being left. And I didn't. It means I promised myself that if I ever gave my heart again, it would be from a place of choice, not desperation. It means I remember who I was before anyone ever told me I wasn't enough." He nodded, eyes warm. "I'm glad for whoever hurt you," he said quietly. "If it means I got to meet the woman you became after." I swatted his arm, laughing. But a part of me understood what he meant. Pain had carved out space inside me. For a different kind of love. One that didn't depend on someone else. To prove I was worth tying something pretty to. And now, here we are. All these years later. You sitting at my feet. Your hair still figuring out what it wants to be. My braid thinner now. The ribbon faded and frayed. You asked me tonight why I still wear this same old blue ribbon. Maybe you expected a smaller answer. A superstition. A funny story. Not a first love and a broken promise. And a night when a girl chose her own dignity. In a small back bedroom. But I've learned this. The things we carry quietly are often the ones that shaped us the most. Do I think about James anymore? Not the way I used to. He is a chapter. Not the whole book. If I saw him today on the street, I think I would recognize him. The way you recognize a song you used to dance to once. I don't hate him. I don't love him either. He is simply the boy who handed me, without intending to, a chance to decide who I would be. When someone broke my heart, I chose not to chase. I chose not to crumble forever. I chose not to let one broken promise become the story I told about myself. So why do I still wear the ribbon? I wear it because it reminds me of a girl at a county fair who spent her last 10 cents on something no one else thought she needed, just because it made her feel pretty. I wear it because it marks the day I realized my dignity was not a thing anyone could hand me or take away from me. I wear it because it carried me. From a small town bedroom. To a city apartment. To a life I built with my own two hands. Before I ever tucked my heart against someone else's chest again. I wear it because it reminds me that I can survive the things I am sure will finish me. And now, I wear it for you too. Because one day, if you haven't already, you will love someone who does not love you the way you deserve. One day, someone will make you a promise they cannot or will not keep. When that day comes, I want you to remember this old woman with her faded ribbon and her still beating heart. I want you to know that you are allowed to grieve, to cry until your ribs ache, to lie on your bedroom floor and feel like the world has ended. But when you are done, when the sobs turn to quiet breaths, I want you to ask yourself the same question I asked. Who am I going to be now? And I hope, with everything in me, that you will choose your own dignity, even if your hands shake. As you tie it in place, you reach up sometimes. When you hug me, and your fingers brush the ribbon. You've done it since you were little. Even before you knew it had a story. Maybe some part of you always knew. It meant something more than just habit. Can I have it one day, you ask now? Voice soft. I smile. Not this one, I say. This one has done its duty with me. But I have another tucked away. Same blue. Newer. When you're ready. Not for a boy. Not for a promise. But for yourself. I'll tie it in your hair. You lean your head against my knee. Quiet. Grandma, you ask after a moment. Yes? Do you ever wish you'd never met him? James? I think about the girl at the fair. The boy under the streetlight. The train station. The bedroom floor. The years in between. I think about your grandfather's steady hands. The way he never once made me feel like I had to beg for his presence. I think about you. Sitting here now. Eyes bright. Heart so big it almost scares me. And I shake my head. No, I say. I don't wish that. Because losing him taught me how to keep myself. And keeping myself is how I knew how to love better later. How to choose your grandfather. How to raise your father. How to sit here with you now. And tell you this story. Without breaking. I reach up. Fingers brushing the ribbon one more time. This old blue thing? I say. Smiling. It's my reminder that I survived. That I kept my word. Even when someone else didn't. That my dignity is something I wear every single day. Right here. Where I can feel it. You nod. Eyes glistening a little. Grandma, you say again. Yes, love. Thank you for not marrying the wrong man, you say. A small, half-choked laugh in your voice. I laugh too. The sound old and young at the same time. Thank you, I reply. For listening to a very long story. About a very small piece of blue ribbon. Outside. The evening settles softly over the house. Inside. 3 generations of choices rest between us. Some broken. Some kept. All of them leading to this moment. So when you see me tomorrow morning, standing at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, wearing this same old ribbon, you'll know. I'm not clinging to a boy. I'm honoring a girl who decided, one night long ago, that her dignity would outlast her heartbreak. And if this story has brushed against something tender in you, if you've ever carried your own version of a frayed blue ribbon inside, I hope you'll remember this. You are allowed to keep the things that remind you of who you chose to be, not just who you lost. Now, my dear, if this story meant something to you, if it made you think of your own blue ribbon, whatever form it takes, I want you to do something for me. If you're watching this, sitting somewhere with your own memories pressing on your chest, tap that like button, so more people can find their way here to Dust of Old Days. Sometimes it only takes one story to make someone feel a little less alone. And if you'd like to sit with more stories like this, slow, quiet, full of old hurts and new strength, subscribe to Dust of Old Days. There's always another ribbon, another promise, another choice worth hearing about. Because in the end, we are all just walking through our days, wearing invisible ribbons, little symbols of who we've been, and who we hope to be. May yours, whatever color it is, remind you not of the people who left, but of the person who stayed. You.